Excuse me.
We are live. Hello. I'm George Middleton, your host this evening on this podcast episode of Black Space Live. The topic of our discussion today is a question from Tichina Arnold. What can Black women do to stop aiding in the emasculation of Black men? Tichina Arnold, a veteran of television and the big screen, learned how the world of social media can quickly turn a social media post into a raging debate. After posting a question regarding the so-called emasculation of Black men in America, Arnold found herself defending her words in a follow-up tweet, but the discussion is still ongoing. On April 13th, Arnold tweeted, "Honest question. What can we as Black women in America do to stop aiding in the emasculation of Black men in America?" With immediacy, folks chimed in with often harsh barbs aimed at Arnold, prompting her to reply with, "Still reading comments. Whew. Two thoughts. One, despite all, I will never be fearful of asking anyone questions. And two, the Black man and woman needs to heal together. We are up against a plethora of odds that are continually stacked against us, but it won't change my love for all of us." Arnold's words may have come from a well-meaning space, the Black space, but they certainly ruffled more than a few feathers. In the end, Arnold got answers, but it wasn't the harmonious list of solutions she may have been looking for. Now, before we get into the heat and meat of this discussion, I want the watchers and listeners to know who the contenders in the ring are today. We have an exciting panel of highly powerful minds, voices, and personalities that are destined to make this a lively exchange of thoughts and perspectives tonight. So let's begin with our queens. Would you please take a moment to introduce yourselves and tell them anything you want them to know about you?
Guess I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Asha. Um, I think I describe myself as a, a new brand of hippie, Black hippie. So my thoughts kind of are extreme at some point, but um, misunderstood on another part. But all of it comes together out of love. So.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Otis Reed. As my title says, ESQ. I don't even know why I put that up there, but I just appreciate a spirited intellectual debate. So my background, I have a psychology degree and I'm an attorney. So I love to analyze and discuss. So I look forward to a very spirited conversation today, and I hope you all enjoy.
And the king.
Good afternoon, pleasantries, everybody. Good evening. I'm Bobby Drake, and I just love me some Black people. I'm here to represent the Black male perspective, I believe, and I'm here to ultimately collaborate in what I'm sure is going to be a very interesting conversation. And hopefully towards the end of this, we're going to make some progress to getting to the heart of the situation and getting ourselves on track.
Awesome. And I didn't say too much about myself, but I share an affiliation with Otis. I'm in the mental health field as well, but I am not a lawyer. That's a whole nother skill set. But it is interesting because the lawyer profession is heavily steeped in knowledge of the psychological perspective, how people perceive and think. So, yeah, that's you have two mean disciplines there. You are a force to be reckoned with. So before we begin, I want to read some of the responses on Twitter to Miss Arnold's very challenging question, just so we can set the baseline for our panelists' views. So, the first response: Black men use their privilege as men in a patriarchal society as a battering ram against everyone in our community, and it's for us to aid in some imaginary emasculation of Black men. That is the same tired narrative that creates pick-me mamas and overworked daughters. Stop. Second response. She answers, nothing. Black men have to stop treating the following things as emasculating: having emotions other than anger. Interesting. Asking for help. Being LGBT. Not being the primary earner in a relationship. Liking things that aren't considered manly. Boy, she hit a big swath right there. Third response: America isn't making you drop out of school and not go to college. It's not making you not build or produce anything. It's not making your neighborhoods unsafe with guns and drugs. It's not making you kill a Black woman every 5 hours. You're emasculating yourselves. Boy, she's hitting it. Another one. This comes from a brother. Our sisters can't understand that we're each other's natural counterparts, and there is a clear agenda at work to keep us separate, and Black men specifically a weak and permanent underclass. That's from the male perspective. Back to another queen's perspective. Men who are worried about emasculation need to figure out why others define their masculinity. And let's see, one last one. There's really a couple more, but I could go on all night. This person says, there are so many things to say about the wrongness of this tweet, but the worst is that it insinuates that Black women need to do, in caps, more labor than they already do. So there, the baseline has been set, and I'll open up the floor to whoever wants to start addressing their perspectives. Go ahead, Queen Asha.
Okay, so I've been milling over this all day. So I'm one of those people that I like to offer perspective first. So perspective is, how can the Black woman or Black women help eliminate a problem that was not created by Black people? Okay? This was created by a system of supremacy 400 or 500 years before any of us on this panel was created. What has happened, in my opinion, has been a snowball effect of adversities and disparities that we already have in the Black community as we fight racism. We are not able to fight those who oppress us, so we fight each other. We have a lot of in-house fighting. So now we on this debate about masculine and feminine, and emasculating Black men, when we never created nor caused the effeminization of Black men. It was never our cause. We never caused it. But what happened is it's been perpetuated throughout the generations out of fear and frustration. So the Black man, at a point had to leave the home to go find work, thus leaving the Black woman home to raise the kids and take care of the household. All of these different things created a lot of animosity and fear among Black people in general, not just among a Black man and a Black woman, but just in the Black community in general. We can't go complain to those who created the problem, because that will fall on deaf ears. So what do? We fight in house. So emasculation on one perspective, is not it's our problem, but it wasn't created by us. So you can't really ask the Black woman to help fix something that we didn't create. What we can do is now do some self-reflection. And that's another part that I wanted to get into. The self-reflection is on the account of Black men. So at a point, the Black man has to say, okay, if you're in an environment where you're being emasculated, why are you staying there? Why aren't you leaving? Why are you accepting this behavior? We talk about the big thing now is standards and boundaries. Well, Black men are supposed to have standards and boundaries too, not just Black women. So if you're in a situation where you're being emasculated, why are you still there? Why are you allowing this behavior to happen, number one, and or continue? If you're in a situation with a Black woman and she's emasculating you, it should only be a one and done thing. Why are we staying? Now, society, we can't really help society because society is created by a system that we never had any input in on the first place. We just exist in it. So to ask a Black woman what she can do to help, I mean, I think that's a little pretentious.
Okay, yes. You asked some really powerful questions. How can we stop something that we didn't create, that was created by white supremacy? And if a Black man is being emasculated in whatever environment, why is he choosing to stay there? So very interesting questions. We have good for discussion tonight. Who else?
I didn't know if Bobby wanted to alternate or not, but I can go next. It's fine.
Step right on in, Queen.
Okay, so yes, Asha brought up, racism. Racism is the umbrella where everything starts, right? Because racism produced depression, which, generally speaking, most Black people, if not all, suffer from some form of mental illness, specifically depression. And, depression can be generational. But I've been pondering that question, and I think that it depends on your internal and your external communication with Black men. Okay. Your internal communication is, how you were raised, how you were, rendered, like, were you raised, what type of family environment were you raised in? And what were the examples of manhood in your life? Did you have those examples? Did it come directly from your family, like your internal structure, your mother, father, or was it an uncle, cousins? Was it grandfathers, great grandfathers? Was it somebody in your neighborhood? So the concept of emasculation really kind of starts with what you see in your environment, how you're socialized. So that's the internal communication. Like, how was your father talked to in your household? How did your mother treat? Like, what was the dynamic between your parents? How were you treated? How did your mother talk to you? Your father talk to you if you had one. Who were you raised by? Were you raised by grandparents? So you have the internal communication within the family structure, and then you have the external communication. You have what messages is society sending you about your Black maleness, and what are you deciding? What's sticking with you? What are you internalizing? Or what are you learning from? Because I can say, like, in my household, in my family, I didn't really have like an example of like what I wanted to be a lawyer when I was a little girl. I didn't have an example of that. But I watched TV and I saw Black women that were lawyers. So I said, okay, well, I need to model myself after that. So when you think about this concept of emasculation, what's being fed into your soul where you're being raised, and then what is society feeding you? And when it comes to Black women, I think the baseline is a lot of people don't want to talk about, mental health and therapy, but a lot of people need therapy. And I think therapy is the baseline, honestly, for a lot of these concepts, because I think some women that may be emasculating in the way that they talk to a man and how they treat a man, that manifests from some kind of anger and some kind of something unhealed within them that they've moved through life and transferred onto other people. I think sometimes women don't even realize that they could be emasculating because that's what they were socialized around and that's what they learned. So those are my 2 cents.
Can I piggyback off of Otis? I'm probably pronouncing your name dead wrong. I'm so sorry.
You said it right the second time.
Okay. So I believe that a lot of the women's response most of that is learned behavior. When you have households in the Black community that are matriarchal
Mhm.
and there is limited patriarch or male influence,
Yep.
the matriarchy becomes overpowering to a point, if that makes sense. And a lot of what you see is learned behavior. So a lot of young women, as you know, I'm in my 40s. I saw the way my grandmother spoke to her sons and grandsons. She was very loving. But the moment that they crossed her, that tongue was sharp. That tongue will cut them to pieces, you know? And my mother, the same way. So at a point, I had to choose to learn how to be more endearing towards Black men, even when they're wrong. And even to piggyback even further, I was in law enforcement for 20 years. I did my dissertation, my master's dissertation on the effect of mental health and crime. Mental health is the number one issue in the Black community that is totally unaddressed. We sweep it under the rug. We don't want to address it. And emasculation is a direct result of, like LT said, depression, anger, fear, resentment, lack of communication, inability to communicate, and also emotional lack of emotional intelligence. So it's a whole gamut of things. So you can't give one answer when the question has a bunch of different theories and a bunch of different answers. So anything we can provide is perspective. But to say, okay, well, it's the man's fault or it's the woman's fault, you can't really say that because that's not fair. You have to go inward and look inward. And I think, and I'm a very big proponent of Black men getting mental health treatment. You don't have to be suffering from depression, but to get in touch with self allows you to create these healthy boundaries. Even if you didn't experience it in your childhood, even if you were emasculated as a little boy, you know that it doesn't make you feel good. So you go to therapy and you learn about creating healthy boundaries. So as a grown man, you don't allow these things to happen. But like I said, therapy and mental health are two curse words in the Black community. You don't say that. That's taboo. That's my 2 cents.
All right, drop it. King.
So there's some really, really powerful things that both of you sisters shared and really delved into. First and foremost, I definitely do want to go ahead and reinforce the point that was addressed by everyone so far. And the fact is that what we are dealing with is not natural. It is an unnatural situation we find ourselves in. And it is a direct result of white supremacy. We are living under a system of racism and white supremacy, and we are victims of racism and white supremacy. And as a result, these are things and conditions that have been placed upon us. They're not natural, they're not native to us. These are not things that are biologically encoded in us from our inception. These are things that are largely the result of learned behaviors that have been passed down to some extent genetically as a result of conditioning, and also things and items that we find being reinforced within the culture and the society at large. So the very fact that there is a resistance to this in one way, shape, or another, even if it might not be in the proper mode of response, I believe is a testament to our resilience as people. The fact that we're innately within us recognizing that something is wrong, something is amiss, and even if we're not going about the right way, there is some level of resistance and seeking of trying to combat the issue. With that being said, I believe the statement, the quotation goes, I don't know who's credited with it, and I'm probably doing a horrible job of paraphrasing it, but the statement goes, you may not be responsible for your damage, but you are responsible for seeking your own treatment. I know I did a horrible job of putting that in that fashion. So even though we understand that it's not our fault that we're in the condition that we're in, we didn't want to get here, we didn't jump into this position. However, nobody is going to come to our rescue but ourselves. We have to be our own first responder. Even if someone does come down the line to go ahead and save us or rescue us. We're there on the scene now. So our actions, the steps that we take, can directly affect both the quality of our recovery. It can save ourselves in multiple respects. It can also go ahead and make sure that it's an easier job for whoever's to come afterwards. So we definitely have to take a look at some of these different things that contribute. I definitely do believe that there are things that are done consciously and unconsciously by Black women as well as Black men that lead to this issue. Um, I think what we have to do, and part of this does also stem from trauma that exists. It does also stem from uh, hurt feelings as well, where another curse word, aside from mental health and therapy, and I like to joke about those being the trendy, cool topics. It's cool to talk about mental health. It's cool to talk about therapy. I'm going to drop a status here, a post here, share this. But actually going and doing the work, actually going to get ugly, putting on that war paint, getting ready to dive in and hear some stuff that you don't want to hear. You got to learn that maybe some of the cherished traditions you had coming up, the way you were brought up, the even some of the principles that we've held on to for so many years, for most of our lives, it's not correct, or it's contributing to our pain or our issues. That's difficult. It's tough to go inside of our personal shrines and tear down some of these idols and these strongholds that we've built ourselves, or that we've had constructed in ourselves. It's hard to do that. And even talking about getting help, even that, there's a process to that, because just because you call yourself going to go and get therapy and help, um, like anything else, every practitioner isn't for you. Once you actually start getting in the mental health field, and Otis, with a background in psychology, I'm sure you can definitely testify this better than I can. Your therapists are going to range the gamut in all different directions. You're going to have therapists that are a bit more liberal in their ideals. They're going to be some who are a bit more conservative. They're going to be some in the middle of the road. There are those who have religious backing, those who are more secular in nature. Um, any different variation you can think of, I'm sure you can find that. So there is a bit of a process, even with finding those who best meet your needs. And that's what it's about. Who's the best fit for me? Who's ultimately going to get me healthy? That also means that you might have to find someone that really rubs you raw. Maybe you don't need that coddling, soft, gentle hand. Oh, baby, is it okay? Where is it? Show me where it hurts. Okay. You might need someone that's going to get in your ass, if I can be a little raw about it, because treatment isn't always pleasant. If you have a bone that's broken and hasn't been taken care of right away, it's going to start healing, but it might be healing incorrectly. It might be healing with a bend. It might be healing in a way that's going to cause further damage down the line. And so the doctor might have to go ahead, whether there's anesthesia or not, and the doctor might just have to go and get gangsta and break that bone on you, simply for the purpose of setting it back again the right way. So treatment, it can be ugly, it can be brutal, but ultimately the end game should be to become whole. You want to become a whole man, a whole woman, so you can deal with your issues, you can deal with society in a whole positive way. And that's the best way to cure this. We need more whole, intact people out there who are able to get healthy for themselves and facilitate healthiness in other people. One of those things that we can do is to begin learning how to accept accountability for ourselves first and foremost. That's something else that's touched, because we don't like to necessarily look at ourselves. We like to put it on other people. It's easier if someone else has to do something. Why do I have to go and get my hands dirty? Why do I have to roll up my sleeves? You do it for me. It's hard to do. And especially when you start talking about who's at fault, when you have to start realizing in some cases, nobody did this to you. You put yourself in this position. You're going to have to change some things around. Once we can get to a point where we become comfortable with accepting accountability for ourselves, where we master that, then there's a next level, a higher level that we can ascend to, where we can then begin start taking accountability for others. And that's not popular either. But anybody who's ever been on an airplane, they'll always tell you first and foremost, before you take off, it doesn't matter how many times you've heard it, if those masks drop down from the ceiling, don't worry about anybody else. Don't even worry about your own children. Don't worry about your mother, your father, your husband, or wife. Don't worry about anybody else. Don't worry about your cat Mittens. You get your mask on first, because If you're in a bad shape, then you can't be of use to anybody else. You've now become a liability. You're just one more person that needs to be saved. So you get your own mask on first, get yourself straight, then you can begin administering to the care of others. So once we take on that self-accountability, we can begin taking accountability for others. And we can begin take on mindsets that help fix these issues, where we can say, you know what, I didn't cause this situation, but I'm going to do what I can to improve it. Or I ultimately want to help you. And if I can't help you, then I certainly won't hurt you. So I'll remove myself if that's what it takes, because I want to be a conduit of wellness for myself and for my people. So that's my response to what I've heard so far.
Awesome. So let me just kind of summarize the similarities or the alignments in all three of your responses. All three of you come together in alignment in recognizing that this is a product of racism.
Yes.
All three of you come into alignment with the idea that these are learned behaviors.
Absolutely.
And then let's see, was there a third?
The mental health component.
Thank you. And all three of you have acknowledged that there is a strong connection to the mental health piece. So within that, just that analysis helps to provide that foundation for creating some effective solutions. Now, before I go into add my piece into it, I believe someone was going to say something in response to Bobby. No? Okay. I thought I might have cut somebody else. I want to make sure that I did not do that. Okay. So as a mental health professional, my platform is addressing the connection between the quality of our mental health and race ideology. So the work that I do in this area is, I call it racial deconstruction. So even though this particular episode is on the topic of relationships, it's not really about race directly. It's ironic how race always finds itself to creep it back into our issues. So since all three of you are on alignment of that, I want to just give you some history on this for additional consideration. Have any of you heard and are familiar with the tradition during the time in the heyday of slavery called buck breaking? Okay, so I'm going to read off a little bit of the history. It may sound I'm not going to get graphic, but it's still not going to be pleasant. Buck breaking, mainly utilized by slave owners in the Caribbean, was used against male slaves who were seen as defiant. The process involved the slave owner forcing the enslaved man to lower his pants and bend over a tree stump to ensure that his buttocks were propped into the air. The enslaved man would then be flogged severely. This would weaken him so that he would not be able to resist the rape that followed. The white slave owner would then proceed to rape the slave several times. This form of punishment was worsened by the fact that it would be done in full view of all the other enslaved people, including the slave's family and friends. In addition to being sexually violated, the slave would also be publicly humiliated. The public punishment would instill fear in other slaves and thus prevent any further rebellion. Enslaved men who were victims of this vile punishment often ran away from the plantations or killed themselves as they were unable to deal with the humiliation that they had suffered. It was often too difficult for them to integrate back into a society that had watched them being emasculated in front of their wife and children and friends. Buck breaking as a form of punishment grew amongst slave owners in the Caribbean. White men were able to travel from plantation to plantation, raping male slaves. The punishment became so widely implemented that sex farms developed from the practice. These sex farms allowed multiple slave owners to gang rape male slaves as punishment for any supposed wrongdoing that they committed. So this is a very often untold, unspoken of horrible part of our history. And I strongly believe that buck breaking in an analogous form occurs today. Anytime that you see Black men being treated abusively in any fashion in public view is some form of buck breaking. Now, in addition to that, the reason that I feel this is important is because I believe it was Asha who noted accurately that most of our households are matriarchally dominated. In the heyday of the slave trade, mothers' first concerns for their sons was their safety. And what they would often do, like mothers do today, is tell them their sons to behave in ways that don't harm themselves. And in those days, being, of strong mind and strong back and looking at somebody in the eye is enough as a Black male to get you harmed. So as a result, generationally speaking, mothers learned to teach their children to be docile for their own safety. And in many ways today, Black men on a collective basis are very docile. And when I say this, I'm not saying it as a criticism or to speak bad. This is an objective observation in view of all of the things that continually happen to us and how we continue to find other ways of dealing with the issue. Ways that don't hurt the perpetrator, they hurt us. So with that in mind, so let me finish this real quick and then I'll send it back to you guys. So with that in mind, here's my premise. The label Black is a racial classification designed by the European specifically for the emasculation of the African. So the emasculation was integrated, woven into the label Black. So that means when you take on and accept the label that the European gave you, Black, we know that is Black at the top of the hierarchy or at the bottom of the hierarchy. Everybody knows that answer. And so this is the beginning of our mental health vulnerability. And Bobby used a great analogy that when you're in the airplane and it's an emergency, you grab that mask first and put it on yourself. And I would like to just put this out here to extend it. That mask for us is our identity. And we're putting on the wrong mask. So I'll put it out there and let you guys give me your perspectives on that.
So I remember years ago, I had my son, who at the time probably was maybe about 9 or 10. I don't know if you all are old enough to remember this author named Jawanza Kunjufu.
Mm-hmm.
My father used to talk about Jawanza Kunjufu to death. So as a grown woman, I got all of his books, and he has books about the destruction of the young Black boy. Yes, like 4 volumes. And they spoke about the emasculation of young Black boys, not just in the household, but in the school system. And just the societal system in general, but mainly in the school system, how Black boys are labeled with learning disabilities as being behavioral problems, um, with all of these different adverse labels and negative labels. Because at the time, the majority of teachers were white women, and white women have an innate fear of Black men. So, in order for your son to go to school and be successful, you had to teach your son to be quiet and sit still. Don't be too loud because you don't want to scare that white teacher, that white female teacher. And even today, my son is 17. He's a big, burly 17-year-old football player kind of size. And I've always allowed him to speak his mind freely. That's where that liberal hippie parent comes in. And we discuss his thoughts. And he took that to school. And of course, he was labeled a behavior problem by his white principal and white female vice principal. And the school right now is nothing but Black children, young black children with white administrators. They don't know how to deal with our children on a level that can properly teach them, educate them, or prepare them for the world. But then we go home and we have the same product of those same environments in the homes who don't know how to prepare the children for the world that's ahead of them. And having a son, he experienced emasculation from little girls his age, where I taught my son how to be a gentleman, how to respect young women. And these girls, absent of fathers, don't know what it's like to even have a man or a young man who has been taught to not allow emasculation to occur. You know, he knows his boundaries. So I'm saying that to say that even with all of this knowledge that's available to us, it still escapes me why people wouldn't look to, and I think Bobby touched on this, about it's a systematic problem. It's not a one-sided problem. It's a systematic problem. And yes, you need to take accountability. We all need to take accountability. I am mindful of my words when I speak to Black men. I'm a manager, so I have Black male subordinates, and I'm very mindful on how I speak to anyone. And I'm very mindful about how I speak to them. And I can tell that some of them are not used to being talked to in a respectful manner. When I'm speaking to them and I'm saying Mr. So-and-so and giving them the respect off the bat, they look at me like, what is that? She called me Mr. So-and-so. That's not my name. My name is such and such. You know, it's a learned behavior. I think Bobby said it was a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior. And now you have to ask people to unlearn generations of abusive behavior, essentially. And when we look at emasculation, even in a home, it's abuse. It's verbal, mental, spiritual, psychological. It's abuse. And we're abusing each other because we have no one else to abuse. We're mad at each other because we can't focus our fear on those people who have done this to us. So we turn it inward. And I said this before. We're mad at each other, we're mad at ourselves, and we're mad at society. We're just mad in general. And that madness, we blame each other. Like Bobby was saying earlier, we blame each other. And now we need to stop blaming each other and work together to fix the broken system. Okay, I'm done.
Definitely wholeheartedly in agreement. Uh, what I've noticed and observed in my time on this earth is that very often there's nothing that people seem to like more than being right. I'm very guilty of that. I joke frequently, but I'm also telling the truth. I have an addiction to being right. I like being right. It tastes good when I'm right. I promise my teeth get whiter. That's why every time I go to the dentist, my dentist is always just having wonderful compliments to give me because being right does it for me. Some people do drugs. Some people do sex. I like being right. Um, With that being said, I do not enjoy being right more than I enjoy being correct. You got a lot of people that like to be right. They like to be treated like they're right. They just like to be accepted at face value. Well, I said it, so just take it. Um, but very often, if you go and do some fact checking or do some follow up or do some further research, you find out that the math ain't really mathing like it's supposed to. Um, so when we have these conversations, they often tend to break down into a back and forth battle. They tend to go to gender warring, and it's the men's fault. The men need to do this. Well, it's the women's fault if they do this and that. And ultimately, this tends to be the case, unfortunately, with a lot of our conversations, until ultimately one side either just gives up or they just let the other side have it, whatever. And then, congratulations, you're right. But you still lost. So you have now settled for being the ruler of an anthill, when really the goal should have been for us to collectively be a body of rulers of a mountain. Um, so we have to learn again, and this kind of touches back on what was said before, the whole accountability issue. Um, we need to get to a place where we heal, because this absence of wellness for us gets in the way of a lot of things. Because it's because we have these bits of trauma that results in poor self-esteem, results in these hair trigger moments where someone missing says something or does something, or even something innocuous and harmless, and just triggers us. We don't even know why sometimes. When we have these things on our shoulders, we ultimately become walking time bombs, where anyone missing says it does the wrong thing, or God forbid, it just happens to be a Tuesday at 3 in the morning, and all of a sudden we've unleashed the apocalypse for no apparently good reason. We can't possibly get things done in a constructive manner when it's like that. Especially when we're dealing with such sensitive issues. We have to be able to pull each other to the side and say, "Hey, George, man, what's going on with this? You got to tighten up on that." Or, you know, Ash, you said this. I don't know where you're coming from, but it did all the wrong things. What can we do about it? We have to become our brother and sisters keepers. We have to adopt this village mindset. And we hear people now and again, especially when it comes to the conversation of children, talking about how, oh, the village is lacking. Oh, we missed the village. We need the village back. Where'd the village go? In order for there to be a village, there can't just be benefits. And everybody wants to show up for the benefits. Nobody wants to show up for the responsibility. Everybody wants to come to the house party. They want to have a great time. The music's thumping. The food is great. The dancing is going on for hours and hours. They love to show up for the party. But when it's time to clean up, when it's time to, pick up all the mess that we helped create, now all of a sudden, oh, I got somewhere to be. I'm too busy. I can't do that. And it doesn't work that way. We're only going to be able to benefit as a collective when we're willing to put in work as a collective. And that means we need to be able to sort through the mess, some of which we did not create, some of which we didn't. Say, okay, well, what am I responsible for? What did I do? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Let me help fix this. Once we clean up our section, okay, well, I've got my section cleaned up. I see you still struggling. What can I do to help you with that? When we adopt that mindset mentality, we can fix a lot of the stuff that's broken. And like Asha made reference to, just something as basic as, treating, in this case, Black men with respect, treating the title Mr. or Sir, or if they have some sort of accolade, whether it's Dr. So-and-so, or there's some title, Reverend or Professor. Just that little bit can actually go a long way, because there are a lot of Black men who are not accustomed to receiving respect, especially from the opposite sex. Fairly often, sometimes the term that they know best is nigga, or hey, nigga, come over here, or man, or whatever, or just something very casual and dismissive that may not on its face be, belittling or demeaning. But if that's all that you've heard, you don't know what it is to receive that respect or veneration. And especially when you're in a position where you can witness your other male peers, your white peers, your Asian peers, your Hispanic peers receive that, and you're not getting it. um it really goes a long way. So sometimes it's as simple as that, and it can just build and pick up off of that. But we have to again be mindful of taking a collective responsibility. It's not that you're a bad person is why you accept accountability. It's because you see yourself as invested in the community at large, and you want to be that impact. You want to help be a needle mover, and you don't want to help keep us lodged in the mire that we're in.
Hey, Bobby, let me just tell you something real quick. So you just made me notice something that I do. So at work, like I said, I'm the manager and I have subordinates. The subordinates that I have are black males. I call them Mr. Such and Such, all of them. But then my white bosses, it's, hey, Joe, hey, Craig, hey, John. You see that? I didn't realize that I was doing that until you just said it. And I do it unconsciously. I give the black men, even though they're the lowest of the low on the totem pole in that place. You know, they're just the security guards. I give them more respect in their title than I do my white bosses.
That's actually a personal policy of mine. I make a conscious effort, and it's to the point where it's subconscious now, thankfully. But I make an effort where I try to go out of our way for us. So that's not to say that I'm not going to do anything for anybody else. Anyone that knows me will know that that's not the case. You know, sometimes I'll inconvenience myself, even if I don't want to, depending on the mood. But I make it a point that whatever I would do for someone that does not look like me, I will do, even if it's just an inch more. I will do that inch more for someone that looks like me, because I know this is probably going to be the one time that we ever get that. Not that long ago, I used to be in the classroom teaching, and I had a policy where I would just about always call my kids Mr. and Mrs. So I would call them by their Mr. or Miss, or if I don't feel like being that formal, I'll just say sir or ma'am. And on more than one occasion, I've had a student come to me and say, I'm not a Mr. or I'm not a sir. I was like, well, yes, you are. You're a young sir. You're a young ma'am. But even in that moment, just dealing with my limited area of responsibility, my little mini atmosphere, because I can't go and affect every corner of the world. Not yet. My impact, my reach, it isn't that deep yet. But in the little area that I can, my part of the vineyard, I can affect this. I can already get these young children conditioned to hearing themselves and seeing themselves as a ma'am and a sir, seeing themselves as being people who are worthy of respect, who are worthy of consideration, and get used to that. And hopefully, they may never hear that again from anybody else, but that's a notch on my belt that I can say they got it from me, if nowhere else. This is now no longer a foreign concept to them. It might be strange, but this is something that they've been introduced to. And hopefully there's something that they can learn and seek on their own. You know, I like the way I felt when I was hearing this. I like the way I was treated like this. I'm going to start gravitating towards that. I'm going to start, stepping away from areas where I don't feel this way, and just begin to help build up that personal culture for them.
And just to piggyback, I'm sorry for butting in. I'm thinking back, I actually adopted that culture when I was in the police department. Everyone was sir or ma'am. Everyone was Mr. something or Miss somebody. I never addressed people by their first name unless they told me to address them by their first name. Even if I was in a situation where I had to put them in cuffs, it was always sir, ma'am, Mr. or Mrs. Always.
Otis?
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to touch on something that you left us with, that you said that you think that the social construct of Black was used to strip away the African, and you connected that to emasculation. And I'm not trying to get, gender, specific or correct or anything like that. However, I disagree with that to a certain extent, because unless you're terming like emasculation, like as a broader context that encompasses everything, because, emasculation has like a sexual component, as you just discussed with the butt breaking, right? Is to break the man down, not only physically, but sexually, and tie those two things together. So I thought that was interesting. I guess where I agree with you is that the social construct of Black deminimizes people that are from the African diaspora, because, everybody doesn't identify as African, even though we know from the slave trade that Africans went to the Caribbean, Africans went to Europe, Africans came to the Americas. But, that's people, it's so far removed that Jamaicans don't call themselves Africans. So I think that it's in the broader context, Black strips away people from the African diaspora to identify with who they really are and to reach back to their cultural connections. And that's that's what happened to Blacks in America. So if you were saying it in that context, I agree with you. But the way that you termed it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Two things that I wanted to point out from the comments. Well, your comment about docileness and how Black men have been nurtured to be docile. And then someone, when you were reading the comments, someone said something about being a pick-me. But when you think about pick-meism and docileness, those are Darwinian if you think about it. It's a process of natural selection. Every species on this earth wants to be picked, right? So it can be reproduced. So pick-meism is not, I don't know how it got into a negative connotation, because every species on earth wants to be picked. Am I not right? So I mean, I don't understand that. But so with that being stated, Bobby and Asha started going into, action steps, because that's my question. That was my next comment, actually. Like, we can talk ad nauseum about the rhetoric, where it came from, how it affects us, examples. We can do podcasts, this video. But what are the action steps? Like, what does the Black community do as a whole to combat this? And it can't be, we can't, we're going to vote somebody into office and they're going to address it on the federal level, because all they're going to do is use Black people, as they always do, get some money, make some programs. Somebody's getting paid through charitable, people's families getting hooked up, and it's not really reaching the people that they need to reach. So, we have to have a plan of action. We have to hit this on all cylinders, like at school, if you're religious, whatever religion that is, in the communities. But the people that really, when we talk about things like this, the people that really need the help never get the help, never. So I'm tired of hearing about it. And I'm like, well, what can I do in my life? Well, what I do in my life is, because I've seen so many men be emasculated by the way that they were talked about. I remember specifically meeting another set of family members when I was 10 years old. And one thing I noticed is that all of the men came from the women. So like, they were the children of the women, but there were few and far between. I had three aunts that were married and had their kids with their husbands, but everybody else, I mean, it was like a women of like 15, it was a family of like 15 women. Everyone else, the men around them were their children. And they talked to their children crazy. And it's like, every time we would go visit, every weekend, they got a new boyfriend. And I remember thinking in my mind at 10 years old, thinking like, well, if you keep talking to him like that, of course you're going to keep getting new boyfriends, because he's going to leave, like being called, no count, no good, broke, beep, 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 just terrible things that I witnessed. And I was like, I associated, like, what I saw. I said, I will never talk to a man like that, because that's the first reason or first way he gonna not be your boyfriend anymore. Or, and I saw violence too. I saw physical violence as a way of the way that women were talking to men. So, you have to attack this on so many different levels. But then I think Bobby and myself may have brought this point up. Sometimes you don't even know that the environment that you grew up in was wrong. I didn't know that, cursing somebody out and yelling and embarrassing people and saying the meanest, cruelest thing that you could say to a person in front of someone I didn't know that was wrong, because I saw that growing up. That's how I was socialized. People were very cutting with their tongue and no couth whatsoever and would say whatever. So yes, we know where emasculation comes from. We know that, there's mental health issues, there's racism, underlying racism, there's, a cloak of depression in our community. But what are the action steps that we're going to do to combat this? What are we going to do?
So I want to go back to your first assessment of what I had explained to you about the premise of what Black is. Mm-hmm. And your assessment implies that Black is a valid category.
I don't think that.
Africans were not Black. Africans were their tribal names. Black, and I challenge you all to, and maybe you already know this. However, Black is a racial label. It is not an ethnic label. It is not a cultural label. It is a racial label. The origin of Black came from the European. So the first step in the solution is, as Bobby said earlier, you have to have a change, a shift in your mindset. And as long as we have the mindset of the label of our oppressor, we'll look like we're doing something, but we're going to ultimately come back with the same results. We can speak nice, we can make efforts at giving extra respect, we can do all these things on a conscious basis and hope they go into our subconscious behaviors. But Black is designed to be inferior. Emasculation is one of the key tools to maintaining that inferiority. And when you can teach the oppressed group to do it to themselves, you've got a systemic solution to maintain your objective. So I want to really push this issue, because there is no solution that you can come up with if you come from a racial mindset. Now, look at the connections, look at the similarities, look at the coincidental alignments. Everybody recognizes racism. Everybody recognizes learned behavior. Everybody recognizes the mental health issue. Racism is not some external force that's coming from out of the skies and doing something to us. Racism is internal. It comes from the ideology of race. It comes from believing that people's identity is a skin color. And all you have to do, I know you've seen the studies on little children who have done the black doll, white doll experiment. That says it all. Before they can even read, they already know which doll is the preferred doll. So I want to push this, and I really want you all to really deep down in this, because that is the root of our issues. It's our identity. And we have accepted a dysfunctional, disempowering identity. So yes, when you tell your son he's Black, you are emasculating him. When you take the identity as Black, whether male or female, you are willingly telling the person who identifies as white that I am willingly going to take a position under you. So what do you all say to that?
I hear what you're saying, and I see the logic behind it. And we've had a couple of these chats before. It's always great chopping it up with you about the subject. I disagree, and I'll say what you're saying does have merit and does have weight if we subscribe to the connotations that come from Black or white. One of the most and
before you go into explanation, tell me specifically what you disagree with. Do you disagree that Black is a racial label?
Not at all. I completely agree with that.
Do you disagree that Black was created by the European?
Yes, and let me ask this question: in what respect? In terms of the word Black, or you mean in terms of
there are many renowned scholars. I'll give you one, Audrey Smedley, and her research is worldwide accepted. She's been all over the world, and the title of her work is Understanding Race. And it has a well-documented chronological order of how the labels Black and white came to be. There's no geographical origination for Black people or white people. If you're every cultural identity is correlated with a geographical location. If you're Mexican, you're from Mexico. If you're German, you're from Germany. If you're Spanish, you're from Spain. So if you're white, where are you from? If you're Black, where are you from?
It's basically saying that Black does not have a home.
Black does not have a home.
Black does not have a home. Black is a hue. That's
exactly.
it, and that's all. Black is just a hue. It doesn't have any ownership to anything. And basically, the term Black, or defining people as Black, means that they have no home, they have no ownership, they have no identity, they have nothing. They're just hues, little spots that are taking up space and matter and energy. But essentially, Black people are non-existent. Black people don't exist because black is no origination, and
There's
that's
no
because
origination.
they took our identity from us. And because they took our identity from us, they said, well, here, we're gonna give you black. There you go.
See, the issue with that, and they were saying, but the built-in counterpoint to that is, if that is true for black, then as a consequence, the same must also be true for white itself, because
Exactly.
black and white, and yet we
Exactly.
don't see that same thing being replicated with white, which tells me that it's not a matter of per se the labeling per se, because we have one that empowers one group and one that disempowers the other, and that's simply about allowing the
All
control
right.
of the perception of the color.
I hear you,
What
but right now, but listen, right now, first of all, this is a side issue from the real issue, or from the original issue of relationships and the emasculation of black men. So you make a valid point about the white side of the coin, but let's address that in a different discussion,
uh,
because we're trying to make this part of the discussion tie into how do we address the relationship aspect between the black man and the black woman.
Well, let me steer back in that direction. One of the more powerful things I've done over the years, several years ago, I read the collection of essays by Dr. Anthony Browder from the Browder Files. And there was a very poignant essay that was written called On the Color Black. And in it, it's about, I believe, 3, maybe 4 pages long. Dr. Browder goes into breaking down the origin of those two words, and how, if you look in nature, we know socially, of course, black is seen as inferior, it's less than, and white is seen as something that's on top. But if you look in nature, it's the exact opposite. Black is considered both in terms of nature, but also in cultural background as being a color of power, because black is the amalgamation of all the different colors. He went and talked about how in the past, black was seen as a source of color for people, for strength for people who are mourning because of the power of black, about how black is known to be able to retain heat, when that's considered to be an essential element of survival in many other places, whereas white is
Not
seen as a color of
necessarily.
death. When the winter time comes, when the plants and everything is dying, the ground is covered and caked in white. Nothing can grow from that. So white is seen as being blanched, or being a color of absence, where black is considered a rich color.
But here's the thing,
If
though,
we
Bobby.
practice my point is, if we practice the reclamation of these things, the understanding that even let's say that if we were going to go and continue calling ourselves by these different labels, the labels themselves don't matter nearly as much as the significance we place upon them.
Right.
If we so choose, we can take black. Let's say that you're absolutely correct, that black is this color that is meant to take away from us. If we decide right now that I'm going to take this color that was used against me, and I'm going to make it something, I'm going to fashion it into something in my own creation. You meant it for evil, but I mean it for good. I'm going to take that and begin to define myself and my destiny behind this. That can become a powerful tool in our arsenal, and that
And
also
what you're
goes a long way in reclaiming ourselves from emasculation, because once again, emasculation is about stripping away that which empowers us.
now
If we can get
what you're alluding to, and which has been tried, and they're still trying to do that. They're trying to reconstruct black. Okay, they're trying to make black mean something positive. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but to even go down that road, you're going to have to acknowledge the original purpose of black. So that's a potentially possible direction to go. I'm about deconstructing black, right? The things that you attributed to black, those are attributes, but that's not an identity.
Well, let me say
Well,
say
hold
this.
on real quick. Well, hold on real quick. Those are, just because black has these certain qualities doesn't mean that's your identity. Whatever object that has that color or that element in it, that doesn't make it black. It's still another name. And factually speaking, whether you deconstruct or reconstruct, you're going to have to accept and acknowledge that the European created the label for our emasculation. Otherwise, if you don't accept that, you're not going to be able to properly reconstruct it. And again, the other aspect of this is, as you all have discussed in your opening statements, we haven't treated each other in those attributes that you have just named off. We don't treat each other that way. We have to consciously make ourselves do that. So we have to be real with ourselves that, yeah, there's a nice pie in the sky, black power, and I love to be black. But where's the power? What do you love about being black other than, you know, the struggle? So I'm just saying, let's measure the reality against the delusions, so to speak, because it's delusional to think that we are at the top of the charts when we're at the bottom.
Absolutely.
What were you going to say?
Let me say this. Okay, so number one, black isn't a color, it's a hue. It's a very powerful hue if you look at. So, and the many things that I do, I am a makeup artist, and I am a in the makeup industry, the beauty industry, and black is always considered a hue because of its powerful nature. So, aside from that, we go and look at historical values. If you talk about the European and labels, they gave us so many different labels as far as our physical form. You know, we were Negroes, we were Moors, we were black, we were all these different types of labels, and black is what stuck. Black is a fairly new term that everybody has started to embrace. And back in the 70s, it was Negro, and then before then, it was colored.
And you know what Negro means, right?
Black.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that we adopted these different terms for the lack of identity. So right. The thing is that if I go into a deeper, more cerebral thought process, all of these things are honestly man-made constructs by a society that looks at people of color in general, no matter where they come from, as inferior. Mm-hmm. And the majority of the population are black or brown or melanated people. The majority of the population of the world is melanated. The minority is non-melanated. But for whatever reason, the non-melanated are the people that are in ruling power. They are the ones that set the social standards for the entire world. And as melanated people, we're forced to conform because we don't have any backing to change anything, political or otherwise.
Okay,
we have the numbers, but we don't have the strength yet.
All right, so stop right there. The thing is about So stop right there. Everything you just said again supports. I know it's not a popular perspective that I'm professing. It's definitely off the beaten path, but everything you just said supports the fallacy of making black the starting spot to work in. And again, let's bring it back to this question. How can black women begin to stop aiding in the emasculation of black men? So first of all, that question is pretty much accusatorial. It's saying in the question, black women are emasculating black men. So that's what got people upset, because if you identify as black and you're a woman, now you're being accused of doing something negative to the black man. So now there's got to be a pushback. Oh, hell no. I'm not going like that. You must be crazy. You don't know.
Well, that's the natural human reaction.
It's a natural human reaction, right? But it flies in the face of all of the nice things that we try to attribute to black. If black is all these things, then why are we having a problem with black man and woman relationships? Let's be real. Black women.
It's not one answer. It's a
no. It's the answer that I'm giving you. It's the answer that I'm giving you. A black woman is not going to respect a black man as much as she wants to. A black man, as much as he wants to, and it doesn't matter how many degrees he has, it doesn't matter if he's six figures, what he is, he's not going to give himself the ultimate respect he deserves. And 9 times out of 10, he's not going to give his colleague the same respect that he deserves, because we've been generationally designed to, and conditioned to work against each other. That's what Black is all about. Working against. We do it to ourselves just in one thing: colorism. We have the dark versus the light in our community. That goes on. That's gone on for generations. We've learned to measure each other by skin tone within our own community and inflict the same harm on each other that is being inflicted on us by quote unquote white people. So I'm calling everybody on the carpet here saying, stop trying to make Black be what you think it's supposed to be when clearly statistics show it's not working for us. If you say Black business, Black anything, it comes with a negative connotation versus a positive connotation.
So the issue with that is largely, and all these things ultimately, because I can go along with what you said, that it doesn't go or contradict with anything that I've been saying, or I believe Asha or Otis was saying before. But these are constructs that were given to us ultimately, but everything is that way, because even to this day, right now, the language we speak is not our own. So by default, any term that we come up with, anything that we use or say, is by default going to be a label given to us by other places, because we're not even speaking our own tongue, or even a tongue that is exclusive to us. So by default, anything we do is going to have the same result. It's just that in this case, Black and white happen to be a little older and longer in the tooth, and so there's a bit more history there.
Right.
But even the way we perceive these things, ultimately, if you get down to brass tacks, if you look at the nuts and bolts of it, the larger issue is that you have a group of people that has been socioeconomically dominant for centuries over another people. And so even just colorism, the whole idea of segmenting the lighter skinned melanated people versus the darker skinned melanated people, that's all rooted in proximity to resources. Your ability to determine the quality of life you have, how well you're able to feed your family, the opportunities that you have in society, it's based on that. Where if you look closer to white, or you're able to pass for white,
Yep.
you're able to have better opportunities than people who are darker. And this is a reality, again, whether we subscribe to it or not. This is a reality that we can see literally all over the globe. There
And
is no
white,
place on the
especially.
planet racism and white supremacy hasn't touched. You go to Brazil right now, you have the Blancos, the lighter skinned Brazilians who have less melanin in them, who are ruling on top of the darker skinned ones. All the dark skinned ones are in the favelas and the ghettos in the urban areas, while the other ones are reigning in a position of power. And more often than not, they're reigning in a very abusive fashion. The same is true in Mexico. The same is true in India, where they have a whole population who is older than what would be considered the civilized section. They're more aboriginal, and they're treated as though they don't even exist, as if they're outcasts. Meanwhile, the lighter ones who have less connection to the melanin are at the top. So ultimately, it's about proximity to resources, how well you're able to fend for yourself. So one of the first things, and for men especially, this also ties into emasculation. One of the first things that men can do to begin to reclaim their masculinity is to get in a position, I'm not going to say to get more money, but ultimately to expand your resources. Because even when you're talking about being in place where you're emasculated, sometimes as men, we are forced to deal with emasculation just to get by. So it's a lot easier for you to have a boss that emasculates you, or to have people around you who emasculate you, and you have no choice but to accept it because you can't do better. I can't geographically move someplace else because I'm broke. I can't afford to. I need this job, so I gotta let you talk to me slick any old kind of way, and I just gotta grin and bear it. And when I leave, I'm crying, or I'm punching and breaking stuff, or I'm taking out on my family, God forbid, because I'm stuck in this rut and I can't get out. When you have resources, when you have what is an forgive the colloquialism, when you have what is deemed "fuck you" money, I can tell you, you want to come and call me out my name. You want to call me a little boy. This I can tell you with, joy in my heart and big smile. Oh, you can kiss my ass. I'll see you later, brother. Be well. And we can mean that and know that we're not going to take a loss.
Yeah.
The ability, not money per se, but the ability to have resources, to have that security, to know that I'll be able to keep clothes on my back, keep a roof over my head or my family's head, keep food in my belly. I'm not going to miss meals, that I'm going to be secure. That goes a long way, not just into preventing other people from emasculating you, but from even having self-emasculation, where you put yourself down, where you belittle yourself, it goes a long way. And for that reason, I believe one of the things that can be done by both sides are creating opportunities for men and women as well, where we can become self-sufficient, we can take ownership and responsibility for ourselves and for our communities. Something that jumped out to me in the wake of the tragedy that occurred in Buffalo, and my prayers and thoughts to all our family up there who are suffering from that, directly or indirectly. One of the things that was more significant to me, because everyone's going to focus on the shooting and the killing, but I'm thinking of the aftermath, where this Tops grocery store was shut down for this inconvenience, to put it lightly. One immediate effect was that even if you weren't at the grocery store that day, even if you weren't a victim, even if you didn't know anybody who was the victim of this tragedy, this Tops grocery store was the only grocery store in that community. So because this store had to be shut down because there's an investigation going on, you can't have shopping going on,
Created a
this
disparity.
now area became a food desert in one afternoon. No one has any access. If it's not a convenience store, if it's not a gas station, or it's not a vending machine or some sort of restaurant, you have no access to food, no resources. And now these people are put struggling. So in other words, because the Black people in that area were not able to take ownership of their community, somebody from outside the community who doesn't look like them had to come and put in this grocery store. If that didn't happen, there'd be no food, there'd be no resources, there'd be no jobs for the people that work there. When we get to a point where we're able to create these opportunities for ourselves and develop this infrastructure where we don't have to worry about, will Walmart come and feel nice enough to put a store here? Maybe can Kroger's come and look out for us? When we have the George Mart, and when we have whatever other resources, food, education, transportation, our own police departments that are owned and backed by us, our own politicians that are working in our own best interest and not looking out for outsiders. When we do these things, it's going to go a long way to alleviating emasculation and even masculinization of women as well, where we're able to function freely and openly in our proper roles and determine for ourselves how we're going to go forward. So that.
So let me interject there, because I know that Asha's trying to say something. You made a key word there, resources. So I want to go back to that as soon as Asha says her piece, and then we're going to have to
let me say
close
this.
it down.
So unfortunately, the concept of being self-sufficient within the Black community is a wonderful concept, but history has shown us that that's virtually impossible, because every time we become self-sufficient, somebody comes and takes it from us. And I say that to say that emasculation of Black men in the Black community is something that's going to be very hard to stop, because society doesn't allow the Black man to even protect his community. You all cannot protect the community in the way that you would even want to, because as soon as you stand up for the Black community, as history sees, as history has dictated, you will be eliminated. So that innate fear within Black men specifically has been perpetuated through the generations, because are you going to stand up for the Black community? Are you going to be the voice of the Black community? Are you going to put yourself in harm's way, in danger to be killed, imprisoned, or worse? Are you going to be the one to do it? No. So everyone is talking. I love having this dialogue with Black men, but everyone is talking about what can be done. But the thing is that this society doesn't allow for it to happen. You all cannot protect us. Look at what happened to the Black Panthers. They tried to protect us. They tried to protect the Black community by any means necessary. They bought arms. They took care of us. They fed us. They made sure people had homes. They made sure people had schools. They did all of this stuff. And what happened to every last one of them? They were either killed or imprisoned. That's what happens. So in this society, yes, it's a nice thing to have the conversation. Yeah, this can happen. But in this society, you have to deconstruct the society in order to build anything else. Because other than that, it's not going to happen.
So Asha, you just really explained the mindset of our community. You just explained it expertly. And I know this probably was not your intent, but that really reaffirms my premise that I'm offering you all with regard to this unempowering identity of Black, because in Black, you have perfectly stated everything that we cannot do. So this is perfectly tied into this discussion on the Black woman and the Black man and emasculation, because everything you just said, and not I'm saying that this is not your intent, so this is not an accusation, because everybody who identifies as Black thinks and believes everything you just said. That is emasculation. When you said you can't protect us, that means my woman, who if she sees me as a Black man, that's her subconscious belief. Ultimately, my man is not in control of anything. So I tell you something, just as a man, when you tell me that something I can't do, that someone else has reigns power over me, it's not natural for a man to accept that. It's not natural.
Well, I meant more so as a collective, not as individuals.
No. I know exactly what you mean. I wasn't taking it personal like that. I know you didn't mean it that way. But I'm giving you an objective observation. That we are contributing as men when we identify as Black. We believe the very things that you just said. And when we do everything from a Black frame of reference, that defeatism is automatically built in. And even if you're not thinking it, somebody in your community is thinking it about you, which presents a challenge for you to have to deal with, right? So as long as you stay within the Black-white paradigm, you are correct. Black never wins. And what we're trying to do, as what Bobby alluded to a little bit earlier, is we're trying to reconstruct Black so it can win. I'm telling you, it's highly unlikely that you can do that to enough of a level of success where people will start to perceive Black other than what we've been generationally conditioned to perceive it. Getting back to our relationships, this is so deep, and we have to get ready to close. And I appreciate you indulging me in this crazy theory that I'm presenting to you. But I feel that the theory is supported on historically documented fact, and today's statistical behavior, the way we're behaving, supports everything that I'm saying, even though it sounds delusional. Okay? But bringing it back to why we are talking today, how does the Black woman help stop aiding the emasculation of the Black man? It can't happen in Black. The Black woman is going to see her man as the Black man. So she's going to have to do one of two things. Either do what Bobby's suggesting, and that's a process of reconstructing what Black is. And that's some work. That's not just some, okay, I've reconstructed, I'm good. That's some work. There's a process. Now, my process is deconstruction. I've got that down. I can take you through that because that's what I do. And that's what I do every day.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not dismissing Bobby's suggestion, because there are a lot of people that are trying to do that. But if it's going to be done, you're going to have to first acknowledge the truth about Black. And the Black woman, if she's coming from a Black frame of reference, especially Black women with sons, she wants to first protect her son. Respect is later. I just want him to live.
Yep.
I just want him to live. So if living means telling him to not do this, don't do that, criticizing him so he does not challenge those forces that can present harm to him, that's what she's going to do. So Black men are from the start not empowered. And then I had the old pastor, I'm a musician, I play for a church. I had an old pastor tell me the way to describe the average young Black male's experience of becoming a man is, I grew up to be a man just like my mama. So I know this discussion kind of went some ways that we probably didn't expect, but I think in a lot of ways it aligned very well. I think this deserves a part 2. I think, I would love to come back and chop it up more with Bobby about his suggestions on reconstruction, because I think that's a valid suggestion, but it can't be done without acknowledging the whole truth about the origin of Black. So I'd love to bring that back because Bobby's first other suggestion was nothing can be done without resources. And what I want to close this show today with is the first resource in our community is the strength of the woman and man. That's the first resource. And we're overlooking that resource. We're looking for everything else first without the helpmate, without the protector, without two people joined together in alignment, in love and in respect. That's your first resource. So I know this kind of gone a few different directions. You guys have been enjoyable. I may have pissed you off a little bit in talking about Black in such a negative way, but what have we said? What have we said positive about Black people today? Anything? Think about that. So from that, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this show. Hope everybody comes back. I hope my panelists come back because I think they're looking at me like this guy's a little crazy.
No, you're good.
We just kinfolk having a family discussion. That's all.
Absolutely.
We just gather around the dinner table. That's all.
There you go, brother. There you go.
A spirited debate.
Spirited debate. And so hopefully we'll do this again. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Bobby Drake, who's always dropping bombs. And Miss Asha. Asha, what is your last name again? I'm sorry.
It's Wagner. Miss
Asha Wagner, who brought the heat and the meat. And I'm George Middleton, and it's been a pleasure. Until next time, be looking for us. Black Space Live. Peace.